The Primarchs were the 20 genetically engineered sons of the Emperor of Mankind, and the genetic fathers of the Space Marine legions. The Emperor used his own DNA in their creation, and they were designed to be far superior to the average human. Immensely larger, stronger, hardier, faster, and more intelligent. They were also incredibly charismatic, as their main role was to be generals and leaders of the Imperial military. Each had their own purpose and specialty, allowing them to serve in specific functions that the Emperor's forces would need in reconquering the galaxy. Creation of the Primarchs. The Primarchs were created in a secret underground laboratory on Terra, under the tightest security. According to Ethel the Ascended, the Primarchs were created by the Emperor with the aid of forbidden sciences, an arcane law derived from the warp. Eldrad Ulthuan also states that the Emperor utilized dark powers to construct the Primarchs. It is speculated the Primarchs were imbued with energies and knowledge that the Emperor gained in a warp portal on Molech. The genetic material of the powerful Perpetual Urda was used in the creation of the Primarchs, and she viewed them as her sons. Perturbo would later estimate his own birth to be 792.m30, perhaps giving a date for the Primarchs' creation. However, the gods of chaos somehow managed to spirit them away just prior to their maturation with a great warp vortex. It is speculated that they also managed to tamper with the infant Primarchs. The scattering of the Primarchs may also have been the result of a causal loop created when Argel Tal and his men were sent back in time inside the Eye of Terror to the Emperor's laboratory, as they were convinced by Ethel the Ascended to destroy the Geller fields protecting the infants from the touch of the Chaos Gods. Almost immediately after the Geller field generators were disabled, the Primarchs were sucked into a warp vortex. Other sources state that the Perpetual Urda was involved in the theft of the Primarchs and created the warp vortex that scattered them due to her anger over the fate the Emperor planned for her children. According to Erebus, Urda was unwittingly manipulated by the Chaos Gods into committing this act. Several Primarchs including Conrad Kurz, Rupert Gilliman, and even Sanguinius all came to believe that the scattering of the Primarchs and their upbringing on distant worlds had all been engineered by the Emperor. Scattered across the galaxy, beyond the Emperor's reach, all on different worlds vastly separated from their father. The Emperor could sense that the infant Primarchs were alive, but was unable to reach them. Therefore he used their previously collected DNA samples to create the Space Marines. The genetic material of each one of the Primarchs was used to found a single Space Marine legion, 20 in total. The new homeworlds of the infant Primarchs and subsequent experiences on those worlds would influence and mold them to a large extent. There they quickly grew to adulthood and often rose to power, ruling, leading, and helping the inhabitants. As the Emperor found them, he was generally pleased by their actions, and quickly gave them the leadership of their respective legion. While Arkan Land aided the Emperor in investigating the nature of Angron and his butcher's nails, the Emperor explained that he had no emotional attachment to the Primarchs, because they were tools and weapons. When asked why the Emperor allowed the Primarchs to call him father if he felt no attachment, the Emperor described the Pinocchio story and how it is natural for a creation to refer to a creator as father. Rediscovery. Traditional accounts state that the first Primarch to be found was Horus, who became the Emperor's favorite. However, a dubious account given by Alfaria states he was the first, and landed on Terra itself following the scattering. Most Primarchs somehow recognized the Emperor on sight, and immediately pledged their allegiance on the spot. A few, Lemin Russ, Ferrus Manus and Vulcan only followed him after being bested in contests. Angron refused, and was abducted from his homeworld, something he never really accepted. The last to be found was Alfarius. According to Malcador the Sigillite, both the Emperor and himself deliberately agitated the Primarchs and sought to turn them against one another, with the resulting war purging certain unmanageable Primarchs and their respective Space Marine legions just as they had the earlier Thunder Warriors. This would leave humanity, not bioengineered superhumans, as the rulers of the galaxy. However, the ruinous powers intervened before their plan could be fully formulated, leading to disaster in the Horus heresy. This account may be either a partial or total lie, as Malcador himself seems to keep its validity ambiguous. At the end of the Great Crusade, War Master Horus fell to chaos, and 8 of his fellow Primarchs followed him against the Emperor, resulting in a full-scale civil war known as the Horus Heresy. Each Primarch chose his side, loyalists against traitors, leading their legions against their former comrades. Unknown Primarchs. Almost nothing is known about the 2 unknown Primarchs. References to the 2nd and 11th Primarchs are made in the short story, The Lighting Tower, in which Rogel Dorn describes the plinths on which their statues stand, should be vacant and says, quote, "No one ever spoke of those 2 absent brothers. Their separate tragedies had seemed like aberrations. Had they, in fact, been warnings that no one had heeded?" Also, in the first Heretic, Lorga makes several references saying that the Emperor ordered them to be forgotten. During the time, 5 word-bearer captains were being shown secrets of the galaxy by the demoning Ethel. They are shown the Emperor's gene labs where he is creating the Primarchs and the moment that they were scattered by chaos. During their time wandering the labs as insubstantial ghosts, they speak of the 2 lost legions, mentioning how they were raised from Imperial records and how Rubert Gilliman's Ultramarine Legion mysteriously swelled in numbers each time one of the 2 legions was erased. The implication seems clear that at least part of the fighting force of the lost legions was entrusted to Rubert Gilliman and incorporated into the Ultramarines. If this is true, then perhaps entire chapters descended from the original Ultramarines Legion are in fact part of the gene seed of the 2 lost legions. At the time of the heresy, remarks made by the 5 word-bearers captains Argel Tal, Zafan, Torgal, Malnor and Dagotal suggest that the fate of the lost legions is relatively common knowledge, though kept hushed up. In the intervening 10 millennia between the heresy and the current age of the 41st millennium, it is likely this information was forgotten. The traitor Primarchs in this story are covered with a shroud, so the fate of the 2nd and 11th is undetermined. They may have been found and befell a tragedy as it implies they were spoken about previously. In the novel Prospero Burns by Dan Abnett, it is suggested that Leman Russ and his Space Wolves Legion had been used by the Emperor in the past to cull and or pacify the 2 legions, and that the Emperor had created the Wolves for just an event, utilizing their barbaric, untamed nature as a sort of insurance policy for use against other Space Marine legions. This is further demonstrated by the unleashing of the Wolves on the Thousand Sons Legion in the same novel. Clones. There have been several instances of cloned Primarchs, the result being a mentally unstable, confused, and sometimes deformed creature. The first cloned Primarch was Ferrus Manus, created by Fabius Bile at the demand of a mad Fulgrim. Fulgrim attempted to again convert Ferrus to his cause before killing him once more, a process that was repeated multiple times with new clones. Perhaps the most notable example of a cloned Primarch was after the Horus heresy, where Fabius Bile again cloned a son of the Emperor, this time Horus from DNA provided by the War Master's corpse. Confused and senile, this clone of Horus didn't initially recognize many of his closest comrades such as Ezekiel Arbadon and proved a poor imitation of the real Lupercal. Arbadon killed the clone, and in its dying moments it recognized who the first captain was. During the same period, Bile attempted to clone all 20 Primarchs from gathered samples, the result being a hall of pods with monstrosities and deformed adolescent creatures. All of these abominations were killed by Arbadon and his forces. Sometime after the shattering, Bile discovered one of his clones of Fulgrim managed to survive underneath the rubble of Harmony. Under Bile's care, the clone rapidly matured and was pure, retaining none of Fulgrim's corruption. However, when Bile saw that the clone still retained all of Fulgrim's arrogance and was doomed to go down the same path as the original, he traded him to Trazyn the Infinite in exchange for a lost Emperor's children gene seed stock. Thank you for listening to this entry from Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.